Trump has nominated a woman by the name of Betsy DeVos as the education secretary. Now, Betsy DeVos is not a politician. She's not anyone who's had any significant experience in education. However, she is a conservative activist and also a billionaire GOP donor. Now, to give you a little bit of information about her thoughts on education, she is a conservative activist who has quietly helped change the education landscape in many states, spending millions of dollars in a successful push to expand voucher programs that give families taxpayer dollars to pay for private and religious schools. So let me delve into that a little bit and give you the details on what it means to fund voucher programs. The whole idea behind vouchers is you give people taxpayer money in the form of these vouchers that they can then use for private schools, any private school of their choice. Now, it sounds like a great idea, except it funnels public money that should be going to public schools into private schools, many of which are religious, right? So that kind of does something in terms of violating the separation of church and state because it's public money going to religious institutions. But it also guts public education, which of course leads public education to fail. And then the GOP turns around and says, look at these failing public schools, let's shut them down. Once you privatize education, what do you do with people who can't afford to pay for grade school, right? They're going to snatch those vouchers away, I guarantee it.
So this is a multi-layered attack, and you're absolutely right. So Betsy DeVos is a really interesting person because it's a view into the Republican Party. She is a hardcore establishment Republican. So it's interesting that Trump went in this direction because he picked on guys like Jeb Bush and all the establishment guys. Jeb Bush loves Betsy DeVos. In fact, there are some conservatives who are angry that she was picked because she's a Jeb Bush kind of person. And so the DeVos family that she married into has over a $5 billion fortune from Amway. By the way, Amway had to pay a $25 million fine for fraud in Canada, okay? Let alone everything else. The guy who originally founded Amway, who's her father-in-law, thought that the 1982 recession, which was devastating, was a good cleansing process. And thought, well, if you don't have a job, even in the midst of that recession, it's your fault because you're a bum. So these are these guys, okay? And her, now the family she comes from is the Prince family. She married into the DeVosses. The Prince family has about 1.35 billion, 1.5 billion in that ballpark because they ran auto parts in Michigan.
Yep.
Her brother is Eric Prince, who ran Blackwater.
Yes.
Okay, so now, what do they want? And why does she get this job? Well, here's three things that this family in particular wants. One, lower taxes. Well, if I got billions of dollars, any change in the tax code is worth tens, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars to me. You lower my taxes 1%, as a family, the DeVosses and the Princes are going to save tens of millions of dollars, okay? You increase them by 2%, they've lost, I don't know, untold amount of money lost in their mind, right? So for them, they can't spend enough money in politics because any change in the tax code makes it worthwhile for them. Number two, they want to destroy the unions. This same family has given money to the fight against unions in Wisconsin. And they have tried to destroy unions in Michigan in other initiatives, okay? So what does that have to do with vouchers? And she's Secretary of Education. See, the more you take away from public schools, the weaker the teacher union is.
Yep.
So it's a twofer. You hit unions, which you don't want to affect your businesses in other parts of your empire. And number two, unions give money to Democrats. And if you eliminate that, then the Republicans get stronger, again, lower taxes, less regulation, et cetera. And then finally, number three is she's quite religious. And so you take whatever money you can get from the public schools, get all those other things accomplished, plus funnel that money into your favorite religious schools where they brainwash people into not the American way where we separate church and state, but the un-American thing of, no, religion should rule us all and it should be one religion, not Judaism or Islam or Buddhism or any of that. No. Christianity needs to rule us all. Let's funnel millions of dollars in that direction. Boom, boom, boom. They check all those boxes with the voucher program. And so why? Why did Trump go in an establishment direction, put her in? He did it because they give a lot of money to Republicans.
Yeah.
That's why he did it. He's not draining the swamp. He is the swamp.
Yeah, so we're going to get to the numbers in just a second because she and her family have donated a ton of money to Republican lawmakers. They've donated a ton of money during this past election cycle, $2.7 million to be exact. And so the way you laid it out was perfect, Cenk. It's an attempt to lower the taxes because you don't have to pay for public education anymore. It's a way to get rid of the unions. And look at what she has now. She has all of this influence. She's accepting the nomination. And I'm worried about what it means for the future of American children because public education was supposed to be the way to equalize everyone regardless of their socioeconomic status. But if you come from a family that's poor, how are you going to afford grade school for your kids? And also think about what's happening with college education in the country right now. We're $1.3 trillion in debt because there are no price caps. There's no regulation in terms of lowering tuition, making sure that kids have access to an affordable education. So you add grade school to that mess and make people pay for it, it's going to be a disaster. Now let's get to the numbers and how much money the DeVos family has spent on impacting elections and also lobbying against public schools. So in a profile published in March, Inside Philanthropy credits the expansion of the voucher programs since 2000 largely to DeVos family, which operates 3 philanthropic foundations and has a remarkable talent for moving money by the truckload into socially conservative causes to shift voters and lawmakers' mindsets in a rightward direction. Nowhere has the family made its presence felt as it has in Michigan, where it has given more than $44 million to the state party, GOP legislative committees, and Republican candidates since 1997. As a result of that, by the way, DeVos was the former chair of the Michigan GOP from 1996 to 2000. Simply from donating a ton of money, right? So that makes her extremely powerful and influential. During the 2016 cycle, as I had mentioned, they gave nothing to Democrats, which is fine, but $2.7 million to Republican candidates and political action committees. The DeVosses also have donated millions of dollars to the arts and to Christian organizations.
Well, I do declare they also give to the arts.
By the way, one of their corporations does invest heavily in renewable energy. So look, I want to mention that, full disclosure. Like, not everything is terrible. That's one good thing. But overall, they're trying to destroy public education. There's no question about it. Also, she founded and serves as chairman of the American Federation of Children. And
that sounds lovely.
Yeah, it does. Its associated political arm, a platform she has used to support candidates who endorse vouchers and charter schools and to attack candidates who don't. So right now, as we speak, in the United States, there are about 400,000 children in 29 states that are going to private schools with the help of public dollars. Again, this is public money that goes towards schools that in many cases are religious, right? And the biggest issue is there's a lack of oversight and a lack of regulation. Republicans hate regulation. A lot of public schools, actually every public school, has to follow regulations, whether it's state regulations or federal regulations, and they can't stand it. Now, if there's a lack of oversight, then you have teachers that can teach whatever they want, including what you mentioned earlier, things like creationism and non-science-based garbage.
Okay, so now, final bit of facts for you guys. That American Federation for Children, that sounded so good. You know what else they've given money to? Given money to Wisconsin Republicans to bust unions. Wait a minute, what does that have to do with the children? Not about the teachers' union. Remember all the public unions in Wisconsin? And that whole fight and the recall elections, etc.? All of a sudden, people concerned about children are helping Republicans bust public unions in Wisconsin. Perhaps it isn't about the children at all. Okay, now on another issue that they spent money in Michigan, what they did originally was they would put it up as ballot measures. And then they found out American people don't actually like them. In Michigan, they would lose over and over again. So they're like, oh, ballot measures, bad idea. We tried to buy off the election by buying all these ads. It didn't even work. So, better idea. let's buy off the politicians.
Can I give you those numbers? We have a graphic for it. Let's go to graphic 18B. So they poured $1.45 million into legislators' campaign coffers, an average of $25,000 a day for 7 weeks. And also oversight was not included in the final legislation for these schools that they're supporting.
So let me explain that. What did they spend $25,000 a day bribing Michigan legislators for? To make sure that the charter schools wouldn't be regulated. Now, why don't they want them regulated? I thought you cared about making sure the schools are great. You're so upset that the public schools are not great. Don't you want the charter schools to be great? No, they don't. Because that's private business. So however they want to run that scam is perfectly fine. It turns out, when you look into it, charter schools in Michigan perform worse than public schools. Let me repeat that. Charter schools perform worse in Michigan after all of this than public schools do.
So we have some evidence for that as well. We're not just saying it. Let's go ahead and look at the data. Roughly half of Michigan's charter schools ranked in the bottom quarter of all public schools for academic performance, according to state accountability data from 2013 to 2014. Let's take a look at this graph from Stanford University. They did their own research into the privatization of schools in Michigan and also charter schools, and they found that they're not performing very well. So when it comes to reading and math, if you look at the graph in the middle, 18% do not show positive growth. 28% do not show positive growth.
So 18% in reading, 28% in math. So they're underperforming public schools. And you can look at that data, check it out, read it for yourself. Now, if you got a charter school education, you probably will struggle with it. But despite all this evidence in Michigan, because of the DeVos's alone, have done the most amount of experimentation with charter schools. It's not like they didn't give it a chance. They've given it many, many chances. It's not like the government overregulated. They literally wouldn't allow the government to regulate it. They got everything they wanted, and it still sucks.
Yep.
It isn't about a better education. It's about all those other priorities.
One other thing I have to add, because this is important. Right now, Michigan taxpayers are spending $1 billion on these charter schools, which, as you can see from the data, have been failing its students. Because of the lack of oversight, you also have to keep in mind that the administrators and the people in charge of these charter schools can do what they wish with the money. And so research into that has found a lot of wrongdoing. So there was a year-long investigation by the Detroit Free Press, and it revealed that Michigan's lax oversight enabled a range of abuses in a system now responsible for more than 140,000 children. So board members, school founders, and employees were steering lucrative deals to themselves or insiders. Schools allowed to operate for years despite poor academic records, and also no state standards for who operates charter schools or how to oversee them.
Okay, one last thing. So, Betsy DeVos, back in 1997, when asked about all the money that they give to Republicans, even back then, that was pre-Citizens United. They were already shoveling millions of dollars into the Republican coffers. Said finally, she admitted, my family is the biggest contributor of soft money to the Republican National Committee in the whole country. I have decided to stop taking offense at the suggestion that we are buying influence. Now I simply concede the point. They are right. We do expect something in return. We expect to foster a conservative governing philosophy consisting of limited government and respect for traditional American virtues. We expect a return on our investment. Limited government means lower taxes. Traditional American values is code word for religion. So, yes, I give you millions of dollars, you give me lower taxes, less regulation, and more Christianity shoved down everybody else's throat. I expect a return on my investment. And you know what? Thanks to Donald J. Trump, she just got it. She's now the Secretary of Education, in charge of education of all of your kids.